Hi, Ms. Ayu. Today I will be discussing about the human body's nervous system. The nervous system is the body's command center, which is the main thing that directs how you think, feel, and do. It gathers information from your senses, processes it, and triggers reactions such as moving muscles, feeling pain, or regulating automatic functions like heartbeat and digestion. Our discussion today will focus on the CNS, PNS, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, the neuron, the sensory integration and motoric functions, reflex and voluntary movement, as well as a scientific article. So first of all, what is the CNS? The CNS, or the central nervous system, serves as the body's primary processing center, integrating sensory information and coordinating all bodily functions, movements, and thoughts. First of all is the brain. The general anatomy of the brain consists of the meninges, which is the layer outside of the brain. The first layer is the dura mater. It's the most outer layer of the meninges. It is thick, as we can see here. It's durable and it's made of fibrous connective tissue. It anchors the brain to the skull. Next is the arachnoid matter, which means that it's webby, the name arachnoid. And it is the middle layer of the meninges. It loosely wraps it, so it creates a layer of space underneath, which we call subarachnoid space. And this space is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid, absorbing shocks and washing away cellular waste. Next is pia mater, the innermost layer of the meninges. It is fused directly to the surface of the brain and is extremely thin. It carries blood vessels from the outer layer of the brain into the deep parts of it. Next is gray and white matter. It is two different tissue zones in the brain, as you can see. The gray matter is gray over here and the white matter is white, self-explanatory. The gray matter is located at the outer edge of the brain and the white matter is located in the inner parts. And the gray matter focuses on more thinking because it is composed of neuronal cell bodies, dendrites, and synapses that are densely packed together, as well as the white matter, which is beneath the gray matter. It gets its color from myelin, a fatty protective sheath that wraps around the nerve fibers, or the axons, and it transfers electrical signals from gray matter rapidly throughout the brain like a highway. For example, from this side into that side, since it goes through the white matter, it goes quicker. Next is gyra and sulci. Gyra is the bumps and sulci is the folds. And why does this need to have like folds and bumps? Because as I've said before over here, the gray matter is only located in the outer parts, and with folds and bumps it creates more surface area, and that more surface area leads to us having more nerves around the brain. And it also serves as anatomical mapping, which separates parts of it with these folds and bumps. So now we're going to talk about the parts of the brain. The cerebrum is the first one, which is 85% of the brain's total weight. It is the largest and most prominent part of the human brain. It focuses on actions, conscious thought, language, and sensory perception. So anything about thinking. The first part is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the largest of the four major lobes positioned at the front side of the cerebrum. Its main function is for complex thinking, voluntary movement, and speech. Next is the parietal lobe in the middle over here. It is positioned behind the frontal lobe at the top middle part of the cerebrum. It focuses on physical sensation processing, receiving signals like touch, pain, and temperature, and evaluating them based on your previous memories to give you, and it also gives you spatial awareness of your body. Next one is temporal lobe, which is the one right beside your ears, and it focuses on auditory, memory processing, and receiving sounds from your ears to interpret language. Auditory processing, meaning you hear things and then you comprehend it using your previous memories and pattern recognition in the brain. Next is the occipital lobe at the back. It is mainly focused on vision. It receives raw sensory input from the retina, decodes this input, and then linking what you see with the thing you already know in the past. For example, like writing and you see someone's face, you recognize it. Yeah. Next is the insular cortex. You cannot see it from the outside. You have to physically pry the outer layer open. The main function of it is to monitor the internal state of the body, like heartbeat, visceral pain, or organ pain, and hunger, as well as gustation or perception of taste, converting visceral reactions to emotions like disgust, compassion, and etc. Next is the cerebellum. It is located below the cerebrum, and it's Latin for little brain. It is a major structure located at the back of the skull. It's super dense with the neurons. It contains over 50% of the brain's total neurons. It has three major parts. The yellow one here, anterior lobe, it acts as a connection point from signals coming up from the spinal cord, and then it regulates your muscle tone, checks your posture, and manages unconscious proprioception, which means, for example, if I close my eyes, I know where my hands are. Yeah, that's the thing. Next is the green one, or posterior lobe. It communicates heavily with the cerebrum, and then it coordinates voluntary motor planning, fine-tune delicate hand movements, and assists with cognitive functions. So it doesn't make your movements jerky. Next is the small one over here. It's colored blue. It's the flocculonodoliar lobe. Yeah, and this lobe connects directly to your inner ear balance organs. Its sole focus is just so you don't fall over. It keeps you steady on your feet, coordinating smooth automated eye movements. Next is the main functions of the cerebellum, which is coordination. It orchestrates the timing and force of multiple muscle groups working together. It just smooths out your movement. It fixes your balance and posture, as well as giving you muscle memory. Like for example, when you're playing the piano, you already repeated it a bunch of times, you remember how to do it, and without thinking you can just do it. That's called muscle memory. Next is the brainstem. It consists of multiple parts that I'll talk about later, and it's compact and a stalk-like structure located at the base of the brain. It's right in the middle, and it connects to both parts of the brain and connects it to the spinal cord. It is the control center for most of your fundamental life-sustaining involuntary actions and functions. It has three parts. Yeah, the midbrain, the pons, and then the medulla oblongata. So this is the medulla oblongata is over here, the pons is over here, and the midbrain is over there. The midbrain serves as an essential station for visual and auditory information. It controls basic eye movements, pupil dilation, and helps reflexively orient your head towards sudden sounds or moving objects. Next is the pons, which is over here. It contains the critical nerve pathways that bridge communication between the cerebrum and cerebellum. So the main point is just it connects the cerebellum and cerebrum. It regulates sleep cycles and manages involuntary actions like tear production, blinking, and chewing. Next is the medulla oblongata. It's the one that controls all of our vital survival involuntary actions like breathing, heartbeat, as well as other things contributing to our homeostasis. Next topic is the peripheral nervous system. It consists of all of the nerves that branch out from the brain and spinal cord, extending to your organs, muscles, and skin. The first one is cranial nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, as we can see in this picture. They primarily manage the sensory and motor functions of the head, neck, and facial features. The functions include carrying raw data like smell and sight, coordinate the precise tracking of movements of your eyes, and constricting your pupils, as well as manage facial sensations. And then it handles the taste, contains expressions like smiling or frowning, as well as regulating the involuntary organs like the heart, lungs, and digestive tract. Next is the spinal nerves. There are 31 pairs. It is all in your spine. The groups contain 18 cervical pairs over here. It controls the back of the head, neck, shoulders, arms, and hands, so everything in your upper body. Next is the thoracic. It manages the muscles, chest, upper abdomen, and torso stability. It's also your upper body. And then it's lumbar. It controls your lower abdomen, hips, and front of the thighs. And then there's sacral, which controls the buttocks, calves, and feet, as well as the coccygeal pair, protected by the coccyx, and it supplies skin tissue to the pelvic floor. Next is the general functions. It is somatic nervous system or voluntary control. The PNS collects physical data from the external receptors and sends it upward to the CNS through the spinal cord. Next is motor output. It carries the conscious instructions from your CNS down to your skeletal muscles, allowing you to walk, ride, or pick up an object. Next is the autonomic nervous system or involuntary control. It has the sympathetic division or your fight or flight. It accelerates your body systems during stress, exercise, or emergencies. And there's the parasympathetic division or rest and digest that I will be explaining later. Here. The sympathetic nervous system is your body's dynamic emergency response system. So whenever your body is in danger, puts your body into fight or flight mode, which is the sympathetic nervous system. The body-wide reactions include the dilation of pupils, inhibits salivation, relaxes bronchi, accelerates heartbeat, inhibits peristalsis and secretion, stimulates glucose production and release, secretion of adrenaline and noradrenaline, inhibits bladder contraction, and stimulates orgasm. So the main point of this SNS is to make sure you are fully aware of your situation and blocks all other functions like excretion and digestion to focus on you surviving. Next is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the SNS. It recovers your normal situation after you go to fight or flight mode. The reaction is to calm your cardiovascular system or make your heart rate lower, reduce your blood pressure, and returning your circulatory system to a peaceful baseline. It constricts back your airways from the ones that was dilated before. It focuses your vision back to your normal state so it doesn't dilate and you can focus more on what you're doing. It activates digestion and it activates excretion as well. Here's the comparison. The sympathetic nervous system activates during stress, emergencies, exercise, or danger, and the PSNS activates during calm, safety, relaxation, and recovery. An example of SNS and PSNS is when you are chasing a train. For example, when you look at the clock and you realize your train leaves in 2 minutes, you sprint down the street, your airways immediately dilate to let in maximum oxygen for your body's activity rate. Your legs start to move and your heart rate spikes to send oxygen throughout the body. And then when you sit in the train, like you caught the train already, you sit down and you chill out. Your heart rate drops, your airways constrict back to normal, and your pupils just go to normal so you can focus cleanly on the things you do next. Next topic is the neurons. The structures include the dendrites, which is a branch-like extensions projecting from the cell body over here. It receives chemical signals, which is neurotransmitters, from neighboring neurons and converts them into small electrical impulses directed toward the center of the cell, or the cell body. Next is the cell body or soma. It contains the nucleus and essential organelles like mitochondria and ribosomes. It maintains the cell life, produces necessary proteins, and integrates all incoming electrical signals from the dendrites. Next is the axon hillock, which is the one that looks like a funnel. Its main function is just to pick which signal is strong enough and triggers an electrical pulse called a action potential. And next is the axon, which is a one-way highway which leads this electrical signal down the nerve. Next is the myelin sheath. You can see here it's the blue thing. It is a fatty tissue wrapping around the sections of the axon. This is the one that I said before in the white matter, and it prevents electrical leakage and accelerates the speed at which the electrical signals travels down the line. Next is the nodes of Ranvier, which is the parts where the myelin sheath is not covering. It literally just boosts this electrical signal so it doesn't die down. Next is the axon terminals at the end over here. When the electrical signal reaches these tips, it triggers the release of chemical neurotransmitters, the ones where the dendrites receive. So this axon terminal releases these chemical signals to transfer to other neurons. Next is the type of neurons. The first one is sensory neurons over here. We can see that it's unipolar, seeing that there is no dendrites at the end. It travels from the body receptors to the CNS. It detects external stimuli like light, sound, heat, and touch, or internal stimuli like blood pressure or muscle stretch, and carry that raw sensory data directly into the brain or spinal cord for processing. Next is the motor neurons over here. It is multipolar, meaning it has two or more poles. It travels from the CNS to the muscles or the glands. It transmits voluntary and involuntary action commands away from the brain and spinal cord to the effector organs. It also commands your skeletal muscles and other stuff too. You can see over here. Next is the interneurons. It is multipolar also. It stays entirely within the CNS. It processes data, stores memories, makes decisions, and manages complex reflexes, and it's located inside the CNS. So it's all it can be transferring all the signals back and forth, or it can be responsible for your involuntary actions. Next is sensory, integration, and motoric functions. The processes include sensory, which focuses on detection, generation, which is where once like a stimulus reaches a certain threshold, it creates an electric impulse in an afferent neuron, and transmission is when that impulse from that afferent neuron moves throughout the body and to the central nervous system. Next is integration, which consists of reception, where sensory signals arrive at the processing centers. The data first reaches the thalamus, routing the information to parts of the brain. So it spreads it out through the brain. Next is interpretation, where the brain analyzes it, interprets it, and contextually processes the incoming data. And then finally, it does decision making, where once the data is processed, it decides on the most appropriate reaction. Next is motoric response, where the CNS signals goes into your effector cells, and it creates a response, whether it is a muscle where it contracts or a gland where it secretes. Reflex and voluntary movement. Here's the comparison table. The reflex action is automatic and unconscious, while the voluntary action is intentional and conscious. The reflex action integrates in the spinal cord normally, and the voluntary action happens in the brain or the cerebral cortex. The response speed of the reflex action is very fast, while the voluntary action is not. The reflex action, the neural pathway is the reflex arc where we'll be discussing later on, and the voluntary action is complex cortical loops, or where it loops around in your main CNS to make you think and other cognitive functions. And the reflex action's primary purpose is for survival and protection, while the voluntary action is for complex task and goal pursuit. The reflex arc mechanism, as I said before, it starts with receptor, where the specialized nerve endings detect a change in the environment like pain, pressure, or a stretch and convert it into an electrical nerve impulse. Next is the afferent neuron. The next step happens in the afferent neuron, and this nerve cell carries the electrical impulse away from the receptor and towards the CNS, specifically the spinal cord or the brainstem. And then it integrates over there in the spinal cord or the brainstem, and it is processed and routed to the outgoing nerve. In most reflex arcs, this involves a relay neuron or interneuron, where it transfers like a bridge, and then it transfers that signal to the sensory or a motor neuron. Next is the motor neuron, where the nerve cell carries the newly processed command impulse away from the CNS, where I said it's from the spinal cord or the brainstem, and out towards the body's target organs. And the final one is the effector, which is the target organ, which can be a muscle or a gland. An example of this reflex arc mechanism is the knee-jerk reflex, where a doctor takes a rubber mallet and hits your knee. The receptor detects that hit, which stretches the receptors, and then it transfers that to the sensory neuron, which transfers it to the integration center, and then the spinal cord makes a reflex and transfers it to the motor neuron, and it goes to the effector muscle, making your thigh contract and causing your leg to do that. Next, this is the scientific paper, Effects of Physical Exercise on Central Nervous System Functions, a review of a brain region-specific adaptations. The main idea of it is that it investigates the effects of physical exercise on the CNS functions, focusing on region-specific adaptations in the brain. The way they do it is to use data from rodent models, or murine. It examines how chronic exercise drives molecular and cellular changes in more primitive survival-related areas of the brain, specifically the brainstem, hypothalamus, and the basal ganglia. The problem discussed is that most exercise studies only look at the higher brain areas like the hippocampus, which is the one focusing on memory and thinking. And they are doing this because very little research focuses on the primitive or deep parts of the brain, and why it matters is that these deep areas keep us alive by managing daily survival and body habits. These deeper parts of the brain controls our sleep cycle, metabolic functions, food intake, energy balance, cardiovascular regulation, stress response, motor control, and neuroprotection, which is the prevention of the death of the nerves in the CNS. The key findings in this paper is that the brainstem, I have categorized it into regions. First of all, it's the brainstem, where 6 weeks of voluntary, keyword voluntary, wheel running helps reduce out-of-control stress responses in rodents. And voluntary exercise increases the levels of galamin, or a chemical messenger in the LC. This helps calm down the brain's hyperreactive fight or flight response to acute physical stressors. Next is the hypothalamus, where exercise helps us regulate daily sleep-wake cycles, since the hypothalamus is the one responsible for this. And short-term voluntary exercise rapidly cuts down the intake of high-fat foods in rats by nearly 50%. And next is the basal ganglia, where regular exercise lowers oxidative damage and inflammation in this region, which preserves smooth muscle controls and motor skills. Exercise produces factors that are crucial for survival of dopamine-producing cells, which prevents Parkinson's disease. The insights I got from this is that forced workout can create negative mental stress that alters physical results. So choosing to exercise voluntarily builds a physical shield in your brain against anxiety, so it makes you less stressed. Next is regular exercise triggers specific chemical boosts that improve your sleep patterns, which protects your metabolism from stress eating and actively defend dopamine cells against diseases like Parkinson's. Now, why is this important? Well, the brain rewiring in primitive regions demonstrate that exercise physically rewires them and makes them work better in certain cases. Next is the optimization of survival systems. By targeting these deep structures, researchers know how physical activity directly enhances automatic survival functions, including sleep, metabolism, and stress responses. And finally, this establishes that voluntary exercise protects the brain. So that involuntary exercise, like forced exercise, for example, when you're in PE class, can create psychological stress. Yeah. The nervous system coordinates all bodily functions through a continuous loop of sensory inputs, central nervous system integration, and motor response. This communication loop manifests either as a rapid unconscious survival loop processed in the spinal cord of the reflex arc, or as a deliberate action directed by the brain. Structurally, these signals travel along specialized neurons, which are organized into complex peripheral nerve pathways and protective tissue layers. Finally, this is all regulated by the autonomic nervous system, balancing the high energy fight or flight, and the sympathetic branch, which is the restorative rest and digest, to maintain homeostasis. The main point is that all of the functions is a continuous loop of sensory input, and then your central nervous system thinking about it, and it goes back to motor response. So afferent, CNS, efferent. Here are my resources, and thank you.